Okay, so everybody, we're now recording. Just a quick sort of how did we get here that we'll start with. About 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, I guess, we started a pilot project with the National Center for Medical Legal Partnership, LegalServer, and 6 legal services programs, several of whom are represented on the call today, including Legal Aid of Western New York, Montana Legal Services, Mobilization for Justice, formerly MFY Legal Services, Legal Aid of Arkansas, Land of Lincoln, and Community Legal Services, Community Legal Aid Services, I think, of Delaware. And if I forgot someone, my apologies. So they helped us pilot MLP features, helped us identify and pilot MLP features in LegalServer. And then about 1.5 years ago, we made those features public to everybody who uses LegalServer. And as we expected to do, we've learned a lot over the past 2.5 years, and started to have some ideas of how we can use these, how we can make use of them better, how we can simplify and streamline things. So I want to just give a thank you to LegalServer, who for that pilot project, they donated all of their time to build out these MLP fields and features. So thank you, LegalServer, for that. And then also I want to say thank you to the National Center for Medical Legal Partnership, who supported my time as I was working with the pilot sites and LegalServer to build out those features. If you are brand new to the concept of MLP features in LegalServer, I want to refer you to a couple of places. One is to an introductory video that we recorded back in summer 2016 when the features were first launching, and LegalServer has made that available on their YouTube channel, and in the chat box you should see the link there. And then another helpful piece of information is that the help site, the LegalServer help site, maintains a list of medical legal partnership related fields and features, and I also included the link to that help site in the chat box. More recently, I did a survey of a number of LegalServer using medical legal partnerships in 2018 to get a sense of how they were using LegalServer to help support the work of their medical legal partnership, to get their ideas for how to improve existing features in LegalServer, and also get their ideas for adding new MLP related features to LegalServer. And the impetus for that was Montana Legal Services received a technology innovation grant from the Legal Services Corporation, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail towards the end of our call, but that TIG does also include some funding for improving MLP features in LegalServer. So we wanted to get the input from the community on that. So a number of you who are on the phone participated in that survey. Thank you for that. And one of the things that I noticed in the survey, in addition to getting some good ideas of things that we could do, was the realization that actually a lot of people, that there are a lot of things that we can do in LegalServer already related to medical legal partnership that people aren't aware of. And so that was kind of one of the main reasons that I wanted to have this call, to make sure that people know that they can customize their LegalServer to do a lot of things that, at least according to the survey, they weren't aware are already possible to do in LegalServer. So that's what I want to do today, as well as share some ideas and improvements that people have come up with on their own over the last 1.5 years, 2 years that these features have been live. Oops. Okay, so just very, very briefly, I want to review the features that are already available. I also meant to put in a link, and I'll do this towards the end of the call. There is a configuration guide, so for those of you who either don't have any MLP features set up in LegalServer or don't have all of the MLP features set up in LegalServer, you can find this configuration guide on the National Center for Medical Legal Partnerships website. If you type into the search box LegalServer, it will take you to a spot where you can download this configuration guide. And then one of the things that I learned from the survey is that a number of people are using some features, but not all of the features. So I just wanted to do a quick rundown of what's available right now, so that those of you on the phone who maybe are using some things and ready to move on to use some new things, just know what those things are. So it's already possible in LegalServer to record referrals received from healthcare partners using either pre-screens or callbacks and/or callbacks. You can already use branch logic to ask medical legal partnership related questions during intake. So for example, depending on what program you choose or what funding code you choose, you can have medical legal partnership specific questions show up during the intake process. You can add or update MLP information during a case from the Actions menu. Some people call this a special program page, an MLP special program page. Other people might call it something like MLP info or edit MLP info. So once a case is open, you can go ahead and add and update information there. You can also put together some special MLP tabs in a case profile view so that you can quickly and easily access MLP relevant information from your open case. You can collect MLP specific information upon case closure, similar to during intake. You can have some MLP specific questions pop up on your case closing page. You can track MLP consults through outreaches. We'll talk a lot about this later in the call. A lot of programs, a lot of you on the phone do a lot of consultation to your healthcare partners. You're not opening a case, you don't have a client, but you're sharing really important and relevant legal information with your healthcare partners. And we have struggled a little bit, I have struggled a little bit with how best to collect that information. And I want to share 3 different ways that 3 different programs are doing that, so that you all can think about if you're doing it now and it's a little bit clunky, the ways that you might streamline it. If you're not doing it at all, ways that you might set it up. You can track facilitated referrals. That's another way of saying a warm handoff. Some places, in particular when you have strong other legal services partners in your community or state, you may be handing off a warm handoff of MLP patients to another organization that's going to serve them. You can track trainings and outreaches. Some people call them other services. You can run reports. So those are things that you can already do now, sort of generally speaking. So from the survey, I learned that many programs are doing some of these, but not all of these. Okay, this is another Cleveland mural, a favorite of mine. And this is going to take us into, while we're still here on one of my favorite murals, I wanted to share some really good news from LegalServer. So the #1 most common thing I get asked when I'm talking to people about what they might want in LegalServer is for the MLP fields to copy over for quick case copy or new case for client. And also for copy when you copy an outreach, if you have the copy and outreach feature activated in your site. And if you don't, I strongly recommend that you do it. It's super easy. You can do a search in the help page for LegalServer. That the MLP fields would also copy. So as we know, many MLP patients have more than one legal problem at any given time, and we are often opening more than one case for the MLP patients or their parent or whoever we might be representing. And so of course, quick case copy and new case for client are really great, but they would be even better if the MLP fields would copy. So LegalServer has kindly agreed that hopefully by the end of the summer, this will be possible. So there's a lot of reasons to be nice to your organization's contact person at LegalServer, and this is a reason to be really nice to them because they have this in the pipeline, and again, hopefully by the end of the summer, this is something that's going to be available. Okay, so good news. All right, I wanted to address some common misconceptions. These are the things that came up in the survey that made me realize that a lot of people just don't know what's possible in LegalServer. And there's many, many reasons for that. The number one reason being that people are really busy doing really important work and it's not possible to know everything. But let's just kind of run through this list so that people know that they can sit down and talk to their LegalServer administrator and think about ways in which they could get this customization done in their instance of LegalServer. Okay, so some people made requests about changing the way that they're using MLP Prescreen, in particular to record referrals. And I just wanted to make clear that if you wanted to add some fields to that or take some fields off of the way that you currently have the Prescreen that tracks referrals, that is absolutely possible already. So you want to check in with your LegalServer administrator about making changes. And just a few words of wisdom. As somebody, you know, now that I'm a freelancer and I work on my own, I don't wear as many hats as I used to. But before I was a consultant, I was the LegalServer administrator for the nonprofit that I was working for. And like many LegalServer administrators at nonprofits, you know, you're wearing about 8 to 10 different hats. And it can be challenging to prioritize LegalServer customizations along with all the other things that you have on your plate. So if you're going to be making some requests of your LegalServer administrator, thinking about other ways that you want to get help with LegalServer, I encourage you to be super, super organized and put together like a beautiful Excel spreadsheet that like documents all the changes that you want to make, or like doing screenshots and, you know, neatly and tidily, like crossing out things you don't want and, you know, very legibly writing in additional fields that you want moved there, just to make it as easy as possible for whoever it is going to help you with this. Be kind to them. Okay, another question that request that had come up on the survey is also possible, which is reviewing information from the pre-screen on the intake. So for those of you who don't use pre-screens, just a quick to let you know, it's sort of like a pre-screen is a pre-intake basically, and they can convert into an intake, and the information that was in the pre-screen then moves over to the intake. And often we think about the information that moves over to the intake to be like client name, address, date of birth, demographics, maybe some financial information, things like that. But you could similarly build in some branch logic to your intake where you'd be able to review directly the information from the pre-screen. And that includes any pre-screen notes that you took. So it absolutely is already possible to review information from a pre-screen. It just takes a little bit of setup to make that happen. A lot of people made requests that they wanted to make changes to the drop-down menus. Again, that's something that's already available. You can, there's, in most of the MLP drop-down menus, we pre-populated them with our pilot sites and some others that we talked to. We generated those ideas, but you can make any of those inactive. If you don't want to see them, you can make them inactive, and you can also add your own choices as well. So that's something that's absolutely already possible. An idea that I thought was a great one for medical legal partnerships is tracking treating providers, not just the referring provider. Usually it's one person perhaps making the referral. And this is, I think, especially true for people who get a lot of their referrals through social work or other non-direct patient services. You know, the referrals maybe are not coming directly from a physician or a nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, or so on, is to be able to track treating providers. So you could set that up. You could make treating providers a litigation contact type, and then use the add case contacts block on your MLP forms or elsewhere. And so you could already set this up to track treating providers if that's something that you wanted to do. Sending emails from LegalServer to healthcare providers, you can already do this. You know, there may be questions that you need to think through about what type of information would be included in there. And Leah can correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, I don't believe it's possible to send an encrypted email from LegalServer to a healthcare provider, but it is possible to send an email directly from the case to the healthcare provider. If that's something that you wanted to set up, that's already possible. Another thing that I thought was a really good idea that somebody mentioned on the survey was creating basically like a feedback form for the referring or treating providers that you could send at the end of the case. And so for this, I think you could just set it up as a print view. You could decide what fields you wanted to make, what pieces of information you wanted to make part of that feedback form that could be sent to a referring provider. And then you could do it as a PDF and encrypt the PDF before you send and put on a password, or however you wanted to work through that. But I thought that that was a really good idea that I wanted to share, let people know that it's already possible. Someone also asked about posting notes for a client to multiple cases. I'm not going to go into detail about this here now, but it is possible to set up something that I think if LegalServer could rename this process, they would, but there's master and subordinate cases. And so you could identify, maybe the first case that came in for the client as the master case, and then have the other cases set up as subordinate cases. And then from the master case, you're able to access notes from all of the subordinate cases. So it's not the smoothest process in my experience, and it may be that other people have gotten really good at doing it. But if it's something that's really important to you, then I think you can absolutely make it work. Standard reports, there are already standard reports available. I have to say this is where I haven't done as great a job as I wish that I had. And so I have been sort of tweaking some standard reports, and I have intended for a long time to put them out on the LegalServer admins list. I've always sent them to people when they ask me if they could have them as a sample, but I have never made them available on the list. So I'm saying out loud that a goal of mine for the next month or so is to put some standard MLP reports out on the LegalServer administrators list so that people could import them and then customize them to meet their own needs. And then sending text messages. Sending text messages is already possible from LegalServer. There is setup that you need to do. There is a fee associated with doing it, and that's been addressed other places. I'm not going to talk a lot about it today, but there are places on the help site for LegalServer where you can find out more information. And I should have put SMS messages, so text/SMS messages. If you use that as your search term, you can find out more about sending SMS text messages from LegalServer directly to clients. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has any questions or comments before I move on to talk about a couple of MLP, what I'm calling MLP adjacent features that are not specifically related to MLP, were not created for MLP, but I think a lot of MLPs might like to use them. So any questions that anybody wants to be unmuted or ask a question via chat?
Hey Mallory, this is Ron.
Hey Ron.
Just to let you know, I'd be happy to put any reports that you want, example reports, on our example reports help page too. So.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ron.
Sure.
Yeah, so on the LegalServer help site, there's also sample reports, and Ron's going to put them there. So great, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and if anybody has questions about these later on, they should feel free to raise their hands. And if anybody has any questions about any of this stuff that they want to talk a little bit more specifically about their own site, you can be in touch with me as well. Okay, so there's two MLP adjacent features that I think are quite relevant. Medical record requests and school history. So for medical records requests, I want to give a thank you to Legal Counsel for Health Justice. They may be on the call today. They're the ones who worked with LegalServer to set up the medical request tracking system. And then also a thank you to Children's Law Center, who were the ones as they were moving on to LegalServer, maybe they still are moving, set up the school history block. So both of those organizations have vibrant long-term MLPs. So thank you to them. So I'm going to kind of go out here and just show you. Okay, so MFY Legal Services is now called Mobilization for Justice, but so you can see that we haven't updated our demo site in a little while. I don't think I need to log back in to show this to you, actually. And there's no actual clients throughout today. I'm going to show you a few things, and there won't be any actual client names on here. So a lot of the names, if I was the one who created them, will be Harry Potter characters. So you can see here that there's a medical records request list view with all these like really great pieces of information that you can track. It does require a little bit of setup behind the scenes, but once you get things set up, I think it's really handy for tracking medical requests that you may have sent out. So handy for MLPs, certainly handy for people who do Social Security related work, Medicaid related work, and others, where you're really trying to keep track of all the records that you've requested, whether they've come in or not, do you owe money to for the copying, etc., etc. So you can see the list here. For MFY, I added a few extra things to this auxiliary process that we built. One is tasks and deadlines, so that you could see if any tasks or deadlines had been set up. I did this last summer, as you can see. I haven't completed it yet. You can add a new request here. So I'll, oops, oh, I'm logged out, that's why it's not working. Well, if it was, I could pull up the provider, there'd be a doctor list to indicate the person who's the treating provider, all this kind of information. And then MFY, Mobilization for Justice, also asked, could they add a case note at the same time that they were entering their medical record request? So we added that there. And then they also wanted to be able to add a document or see what documents had been sent in already from the case at the same time they were reviewing this information. So we did that as well. So I'm pretty sure there's also something on the help site about medical records requests, but I just wanted to refer to that really quickly. And then similarly, here's the school history. I just put in a couple of schools here, and you can see across the top the different pieces of information that you can collect about a student and their school history. You can set up schools as an organization so that you can pull those in, all this kind of thing when the student started there. And then if they're receiving special education, then you can answer additional questions. So again, this is the demo site, so I didn't completely build this out, but you can, indicate the type of school where the student is, the disability classification, a plan type, classroom placement, so on and so forth. You can customize this to meet the needs of your practice. So given that so many of you work with pediatricians and family medicine providers, behavioral health providers who work with children and adolescents, I just wanted to make sure that you also were aware that this is available for setup on your site for use for MLPs and beyond. Okay. Anybody on the phone who's using these features and wanted to say anything about them? Oops, we don't want to start from the beginning. So while I'm pulling us back to where we were, anybody who wants to start, mention anything about how they've been using those? Okay. All right, so I now want to move on. An issue that came up a lot, a request that came up a lot in the survey, and when I've been just talking to people about their needs, is how best to track the MLP consults. So there's a few different ways that you can do this, and I chose this mural for this particular moment because actually LAF from Chicago shared some screenshots. Vivian, who's their head of IT, and their a primary LegalServer person, or one of their primary LegalServer people, shared some screenshots even though she wasn't able to be on the call today. So they have theirs set up in outreaches, which is what I had originally suggested in the configuration guide. And I suggested in that guide sort of conforming or adding to your existing outreach to sort of meet the needs of the MLP consults. And I think that was actually a mistake, that it makes more sense to do what LAF has now done, which is to create a specific outreach process where you can see in the upper right-hand corner there, you can create a new MLP consult. And that's different from the way that you would create other types of outreaches. And I should say, outreach in LegalServer is a term of art. It basically means anything that's not a case. There's no client. And so it's not just community outreach in the sort of more general term that we might think of it in legal services or in healthcare, but anything that's not a case. So it could be a clinic, it could be a community presentation, it could be lobbying, it could be all kinds of things. It could be an MLP consult. Some people call it outreaches in LegalServer. A lot of people have changed the name. So at your organization, you may call them other services. You can see here at LAF, they call them community engagement. So whatever you call them, it's the same module, just with different names. So you can see here for LAF, as I said, this is the main community engagement / outreach page that they have. They've broken down their community engagement in a bunch of different categories, and you can see there they've created specific tabs that pull up exactly the kind of community engagement you want to look at. So you can click on the MLP Consults tab and see all of the consults that are there. And then when you create a new one, you can have kind of a streamlined list of pieces of information that you want to collect. So you can see the examples that Vivian put in here for us. You can still track funding code, programs, office, things like that. She has the program defaults to MLP program. You know, as many defaults as you can use saves people clicks and times. And then this is the second half of the same form. So this is the bottom half of the same form. So I just want to point out there the name of the individual medical provider who requested the consult. So that's pulling in contacts by name. And then she used radio buttons to make it easy to indicate the position type, the MLP position type, the person who made the request, a practice area. And this is also, both of these, position type and practice area, this is really great example of how they changed the list to meet their own needs. So some of the referral position types and practice areas are the default that are in that lookup, that drop-down menu in LegalServer already, but they made some inactive and then they added some of their own, like assisted outpatient treatment, bond court, complex care, things like that. And then they're also collecting iHelp category for their consults. So many thanks to LAF for sharing the way that they're tracking their consults. Okay, I'm going to go back in here. Also want to say thank you to the Help MLP for agreeing to let us look at their site, and also thanks to Ron Wilhoit for setting up a test site that's anonymized. So all of their client names and their staff names are anonymized. So you'll see names, but they won't be the actual names of clients. So it was a lot of fun to set up the Help MLP site with them. They had a lot of flexibility because they are MLP only. They are based out of Nurse Family Partnerships in Philadelphia as well as Chester, PA. And they're a relatively small staff, a small but mighty staff, we should say. But they're not LSE funded. They don't do anything other than MLP. So that really gave us a lot of leeway to be creative and setting things up for them. But I think that there's things that you could apply to your own program, even if you're a larger program that does a lot of things in addition to MLP. Okay, so one of the things that I just wanted to show here is that we actually set up their consults, tracking their consults, as pre-screens. So under here, under pre-screens, you can record an MLP consult under a pre-screen. And then we created some tabs on their homepage that gives you their completed consults as well as their ongoing consults. So this defaults to the person whose homepage it is. So I'm pretending that I'm Penelope Dorothy Brannigan, who is not actually the real name of the person that I'm pretending to be. And you can see past consults that have been done. And then I'll just go here. This is what it looks like when you're starting the MLP consult from the pre-screen for them. And then this is more the substantive page. So for consults, sometimes you might know the patient's name, often you don't. So we made it so that you could enter the name, or you could give the consult a name like, you know, Dr. Jones conversation in hallway, or wherever it was that the consultation was taking place. Just like with the other things, you can pull in the name of the organization and the department. Here's another example of how they really pared down their referral position type list because they are a nurse-led program. There's a limited number of positions within the organization. And then also I just wanted to show that because they don't receive LSC funding and they don't do other types of non-MLP work, they actually use iHelp as their problem categories. And then depending on which iHelp is selected, then the legal problem code comes up specific to the iHelp letter. And then they can write the pre-screen notes, and then we created 2 new screening statuses. One, MLP consult provided and complete, so it defaults to that so that you can just enter it really quickly, you know, a few notes about what you provided. And then if it's ongoing, then you can indicate that it's ongoing so that it will show up in your ongoing consults list on your home page. So, and then you can add time down here if you want to. And then just to show after you've opened the consult that we organized it so that they could see where the referral was coming from. The consultation notes, again, have been anonymized here. You can update the status if you have documents or whatever. So if you have an ongoing consult that's just a little bit more intensive than a one-off, then you can come in here and still keep yourself organized. Okay, then the last thing that I wanted to show you is from Neighborhood Legal Services of LA, that I'm going to show you some things that we've been doing with online intake for them. But first, I'll just say this is another way to track MLP consults. So through their online intake, community health workers and social workers at one location are able to make referrals directly through an online portal. And again, I'm going to show you that in a minute. But they put in their requests, either patient referral or a request for technical assistance, straight into the portal, and then the case is automatically opened. So I'm just showing this as another example. This profile view is just another way that you could set it up to help manage. So the profile view is not just for technical assistance, it's also for the client referrals. So some of the information is not relevant. You know, for example, there's not language. You can see by the case status that we set up in there, they have an online intake site that we set this up in. So you can see by the case status that the request for technical assistance is active. We also have one that's pending. So any request that comes in as a pending request. And then of course a case status for closed. And they'll also, I wanted to show you that they actually track outcomes for the consult in their system. So I meant to pull this up. I'm going to stop my share just for a minute because I want to make sure I'm not going to show up. I'm going to show anything that I shouldn't show. One moment. Okay, great. Okay, so here we are again. So this is the closing page for the consult. You can indicate the level of service that was provided. So you can indicate it if it was completed, if a patient referral was recommended, if it had been abandoned, you didn't get follow-up from the provider who put in the request. And then I just wanted to show here the outcomes that you can track about sort of what you did with the consult. Did you provide information verbally, email, recommended referral, referred to a self-help center? There's a number of court-based self-help centers in LA County, referred to the public defender, and so on, or none was provided. And you can choose more than one option. So that's something that I think is handy. The County Department of Health Services in LA has made a huge investment in MLP, so we thank them for that. And they were interested in having outcomes of the requests for technical assistance, the technical assistance that's provided to their community health workers that are working on a Medicaid waiver program. So that's what sent us down the outcomes route for those MLP consults. So for some of you, that may be a great idea, kind of a eureka moment. Others of you may just want something much more streamlined than that. But I just wanted to show the 3 different examples of ways that people have set up processing MLP consults that I think, frankly, are a lot better than the way that I had originally suggested in the configuration guide, something that we just learned with experience over the past 1.5 years or so. So is anybody else feeling good about the way they're tracking MLP consults and want to share or explain how they're doing that? Okay. Well, again, if people have questions or thoughts about that later on in the call, feel free to speak up or feel free to be in touch at a later time. Okay. This is another favorite mural of mine in San Francisco. So I think we in Medical Legal Partnership can all agree that we all deserve a healthy and safe community. Okay, an online intake. So as far as I know, Neighborhood Legal Services in LA is the only MLP that's using online intake through LegalServer to accept referrals. And I had asked around a little bit before we got it set up, and I know that there are some of you who are thinking about it, maybe specifically for an MLP, maybe a little bit more generally for some of your other community partners. So this is set up a little bit differently than I think the most common version of online intake is for somebody, the potential client, him or herself, is going through to enter in their own information about their own contact information, their own legal problem, and so on. And this is a situation where the referral is being done by, in the Neighborhood Legal Services of LA area, by a community health worker throughout the county of LA, and then a handful of social workers who are at one site that's operated by the County Department of Health Services. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. So we're here in the test site. So you can see, please don't actually go to this bit.ly. I mean, you can, but please don't, because this is where the live stuff gets entered in. We created bit.ly addresses to make it easier for the community health workers and the social workers to know where to go to start their referral. But this is a practice site only. So just to note here that on this landing page, they can either refer a specific participant. Whole person care is the name of the Medicaid waiver program. So that's why we said participant instead of patient, because it's for participants in whole person care. And if you start down that path, then it has you enter in referral information. But you can also, as you see here, you can enter in your general question for the MLPLA legal team, which I should also explain. There's a lot of moving parts with this project. Neighborhood Legal Services of LA is the primary legal partner, but they also have 3 additional legal partners who unfortunately are not using LegalServer, so that's complicated things a little bit. but they've really adopted well, I'll say. So that includes Legal Assistance Foundation of LA, LAFLA, MHAS, which is Mental Health Advocacy Services, which has had a long time legal component, and then BetSEDEC Legal Services. So there's 4 legal teams in addition to the County Department of Health Services that are part of that MLP. And then here we'll just pretend that I put in the participant referral. So we have a big list of all of the community health workers, and they choose their own name. We didn't want to give all of them logins, is one of the reasons that we went the online intake route. They can indicate what program the participant is coming from. SPAs are a geographic designation within LA County. The CHAMP number is a sort of equivalent of a medical record number. They can put in the applicant's name, address, phone and email, and then some additional information. We tried to keep it to a relative bare minimum in terms of required information. And if we click continue, hopefully I didn't get logged out here. Oh, good. Then here on the second page, they're identifying the participants' legal barriers. So the NLSLA team did a lot of training and continues to do a lot of training and relationship building with the community health workers, but to help them think about how to categorize their legal barrier. So here they identify the legal problem category. And then here are the legal problem codes, but renamed. We find out if it's urgent or not. If it is, just acknowledge that it's urgent. They can, on the test site here, they can enter in some specific information about the legal barrier, still some conversations about potentially moving that to the live site. They can upload documents. If they have another question about the patient, so we mentioned earlier, a lot of our MLP patients have more than one legal issue, they can say yes. And then we decided to track this using iHelp as opposed to using the legal problem codes. Kirsten Sorto is on the call today, and they did a lot of training about iHelp, and the community health workers loved the iHelp mnemonic. So it's something that they embraced as a way to kind of organize the kinds of problems that the participants they're working with might be having. So they can go down this list of IHELP, whatever it is, and then choose Medi-Cal as Medicaid in California. Then they can identify a third most important question as well as a fourth. So it's not the easiest way, I think, to document multiple problems, and that's one of the questions that I wanted to open it up for the group if people have some smart ideas about that. We decided to keep them totally separate as opposed to a multi-select because we felt like it would be a bit easier for reporting purposes, but we also could have created a multi-select. Then we also give the community health workers the option if they also want technical assistance. They can say yes or no, and then this is affirming that the participant has given permission to share information, yes or no, further on down the line. And then once they hit continue, it goes to a submit page, and they submit. And once they submit, an email goes to the NLSLA MLPLA team, Neighborhood Legal Services MLP of LA team, to let them know that there's a technical assistance request or a a participant referral that needs to be processed. So this is, because this is a really big project with a lot of partners, this is probably more complicated than a lot of other people would need. So you could set something up that was even more streamlined through your online intake site. If you're an organization that's already using online intake, you could go ahead and start setting this up today. If you're an organization that's not using online intake, then you would have to talk to LegalServer about setting up a second online intake site, the fees associated with that, and so on. So if you already have online intake, you can do this now. If you don't already have online intake, you'd not need to talk to LegalServer first. So is there anybody else on the call who's doing online intake using the online intake features to take referrals directly from their healthcare partners? Okay, well, if anybody's thinking about it, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I'm speaking for Gerson and saying that he'd be happy to talk to you about it too, but I think he really would be. It's been challenging, but really fun to set this up. And it's made a really big project, I think, more manageable for their hub. We call it the MLPLA hub, and processing all the requests that come in. Okay. All right, so I'm just looking at a couple questions here and see that Leah already answered a lot of those, so thanks, Leah. Okay, head on back to my PowerPoint. This is a mural in New Orleans that I really like. Okay, I just wanted to mention briefly these opportunities for potentially asking LegalServer to build a few more system fields. And by system fields, I mean fields that are just automatically available in LegalServer. So, you know, name, date of birth, race, gender, all those kinds of things are just in LegalServer already. And there's a number of MLP fields that are in LegalServer already. And these were just a few ideas that had come up about we might ask for a few extra ones. But if you really like these ideas, there's no reason you can't build these fields on your own. You don't have to wait for them to become system fields. And some of these requests came in actually as part of the LSC TIG, the MLP technology grant that we're working on. Part of the program, we're working with PICA. Iowa Legal Aid uses PICA, and they're the pilot site to build MLP features into PICA that will then be made available to other PICA using MLPs. So we did a similar survey of them about what they wanted, and some of these ideas came from them. So some of those are just a field to indicate whether the client authorizes the release of the information back to the healthcare provider, yes or no. The origin of the referral, did it come from a screening in the electronic health record? Paper screening, social worker referral, was the issue ID'd in the exam room, etc., which I thought was interesting and might be, of great interest to a lot of programs. And then also tracking financial or other benefits to the healthcare institution. So we're already now able to do some customization tracking financial benefit to the client and thinking about how could we help document some financial and other benefits to the healthcare institution, potentially through a drop-down menu or other ways. I already mentioned that I love Cleveland. I also love Prince, and this is a Prince mural in Cleveland. So whenever I have the opportunity to drop it in, I do. My cousin took this picture for me. Okay, then the last thing that I wanted to do, and I really have been talking a lot, is just talk briefly about the MLP TIG a little bit more, and then open it up to others who are working on these issues, working on future projects to kind of share with other people on the call. So this is another mural from New Orleans that I think is great, so I'll leave that up. So I mentioned Montana Legal Services was awarded a TIG by the Legal Services Corporation, and the primary focus of that TIG is to build MLP data collection into the electronic health record. So a lot of what we're working on is thinking about, are there specific MLP fields, including screening fields that can be used to not only track referrals and consults and things like that, but also be used for screening. So the MLP TIG is working with health centers. So the Montana Primary Care Association, which is the umbrella organization for community health centers in Montana, and the Iowa Primary Care Association, the same thing in Iowa. We're working together. They already work with an initiative called Prepare, which tracks social determinants of health. Those of you who work with community health centers are probably already familiar with Prepare. So we're thinking about how we can build upon Prepare, complement prepare to do some of the screening and tracking. So that's really the phase one of this project. And then the second phase is to link LegalServer with the electronic health record that's used in Montana, and link PICA with the electronic health record that's used in Iowa, so that some information, that's agreed upon by all parties can go, potentially back and forth in both directions. So just an example of that might be, that instead of using online intake to enter a referral from the healthcare provider could enter directly into their electronic health record, and then that information would be sent to LegalServer, which would basically open up an intake for the referrals that came through. An example of what they might decide to do in the other direction is potentially you could, have that some kind of a case summary at the end that would include, potentially some kinds of outcomes, legal outcomes rather, that you would send back that would then be added to the electronic health record, and the referring / treating providers potentially notified, and that could be one of the ways that they find out what happens with the case. Obviously there's a lot to work through with that, but everybody's really excited. I'm the project coordinator for that. I'm really excited, and I know that a lot of you are interested in how that goes, so we'll absolutely be keeping you posted. And some of you may also already be thinking in that way, thinking about APIs. That's the connection between the two systems, getting them talking to each other. And if you are, I absolutely would love to talk to you about it in more detail. Okay, so we have just about 5 minutes left. So I want to leave the remaining time to do some brainstorming. If people have other ideas about, for example, tracking MLP consults or tracking multiple legal issues. So when there's multiple referral issues that come into one pre-screen, for example, how best do we track and report on those and know what other types of case we need to open up, and any other questions or concerns that people have. So I'll pop up my chat now. Oh, great. And Sharina Higgins, welcome, is here from the National Center for Medical Legal Partnership, and she shared that link from the National Association of Community Health Centers that gives background on Prepare. So thank you, Sharina, for sharing that link. Oh, and just to reiterate something that Leah had already responded to Madeline about is that information that's submitted through the online portal means that, in fact, you don't have to retype or enter it. So yes, that's true both when it goes into the online site at Neighborhood Legal Services of LA. Some things are processed through their online intake site, and then a smaller number of things are sent over into what we call their live site. So not only is it there directly in the online intake site for them, but also for those cases that they are referring over to their live site, they get transferred into the live site with most of the information already filled in. Not all of the information, and there's some things that you can do to for site-specific fields, for example, to share them between your online intake site and your live site so that it matches up, so that they really mirror each other, and therefore the transition between one site to the other is seamless. Okay, again, I've been talking a lot, and I know that a lot of you on the phone have been doing some really cool things. I'd love for you to talk about them. I also know that sometimes people are shy about talking on webinars. So, some things, if people want to follow up with me or anybody at LegalServer directly, or with the site admins list for LegalServer, if this has given you a lot of food for thought and you'd like to come back, later on in the summer, say, to talk about this some more, or share additional ideas, or, whatever, after you've had a chance to ponder or try things out, you can do that. Okay, and then we got another question that came in that is the recording going to be made available of this session? The answer is yes. So I am recording it and I will make it available to LegalServer. And once they've posted it, then either Leah or I will send out a message to the LegalServer site admins list so that everybody knows it's available. And if you received an email from me, you're not a LegalServer administrator, but you received an email from me about this session, I'll send it out to everybody in that email as well. Okay, so I, especially because I used to do direct client service and don't anymore, I'm very, very appreciative of those of you who are doing direct client service. I want to be very respectful of your time and also appreciative of everything that you do to promote health in your communities and health equity in your communities through your medical legal partnerships and elsewhere. So I know that work is hard. And I hope that these LegalServer features make your life a little bit easier. I often say my goal for my consulting is to make people's lives easier. We want to make the data collection a little bit easier for you so that you're really able to focus on the work and that you're able to tell the story of the good, important work that you're doing with relative ease, because it's easier for you to enter the information and then it's easy for you to pull it out to share with your healthcare partners and other community partners. So thank you. Everybody have a really good afternoon. Please feel free to be in touch with me. I'm going to put my email again into the chat box so people can be in touch with me directly. And have a good day. And thanks again, LegalServer, for hosting this. And thanks again to the National Center for Medical Legal Partnership for also supporting the work early on. Oh, and so anybody, of course, is welcome to come off the video if they need to, but there is one last question that's coming in from Madeline. Let's see. So Madeline's question, which everybody can see, is there a way to build the online portal so that the process helps the referring person move through questions that would help with the assessment? So yes, kind of, can you use it as a screening tool to help identify things with which you can help as opposed to things with which you can't help? And I'll say absolutely yes. So a number of the online portals, especially those that are set up directly for clients, a main purpose is to save everybody time, including potential clients, to let them know if what they need is to take steps 1, 2, and 3 before they step 4, get back in contact with the legal services program. So yes, you absolutely could do that. And I'll stay on for a couple more minutes if other people have questions. And again, we'll make the recording available if anybody missed part of it or they want to share with other people in their organization. And Leah or Ron, any last thoughts that you have? Any last words you want to put in?
No, just to say thanks for doing this, Mallory. So.
Oh yeah, happy to.
Nothing for me either, except for thank you, Mallory.
All right. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. Leah will end the meeting and we'll be in touch over email. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.